In the 1930s, Harlan County, Kentucky became the epicenter of one of the most brutal labor wars in American history. This wasn't just about workers demanding better wages, it was about the fight for dignity, for respect, for the very right to live without fear. This is the story of Bloody Harlan, the struggle of the miners who rose up against the coal companies that owned not just the mines, but the very land they lived on. In Harlan County, much like the rest of Appalachia, life was built on coal. The mines were the lifeblood of the region, providing work for thousands of men and women. The promise of wealth and opportunity brought families here from across America and Europe hoping for a better life. But the reality was much harsher. The coal companies that ran the mines in Harlan were brutal. The miners worked long hours, 12, 14, 16-hour days, in dangerous, ungodly conditions. But the wages? Fucking often less than $1 a day.
McKenna. James McKenna.
Oh, aye, McKenna. Coal mine, 14 cars at 66 cents a car, total $9.24. Deduct. 2 kegs of powder, $2.50 a keg, $5. 2 gallons of oil at 90 cents a gallon, $1.80. Repair 2 broken drills, 30 cents. Pickaxe, shovel, cap, and lantern, $1.90. Total deductions, $9. Total wages for the week, 24 cents. Next. Next.
Worse, they were forced to shop at company-owned stores, paying inflated prices for basic necessities, and workers lived in company-owned homes, in what amounted to company towns, where they had little say in anything, certainly not the wages they earned or the conditions they worked under. By 1931, the miners of Harlan County had enough of that shit. The coal companies ruled with an iron fist, but the workers were beginning to see that if they stood together, they might just have a chance at change. The United Mine Workers of America had begun organizing around Appalachia, and the first real taste of rebellion hit Harlan County when the miners went on strike. They were demanding better wages, safer working conditions, and the right to organize without fear of retribution. But of course, the coal companies wouldn't back down. Instead, they brought in hired gunmen, Baldwin Felts detectives, to break the strike. These men weren't just security guards, they were armed thugs, often sent to intimidate and kill the miners. On May 5th, 1931, everything came to a head. Miners in Harlan County had organized a peaceful march to the courthouse, hoping to present their demands. They weren't looking for a fight, but they found one when Baldwin Felts detectives decided to open fire on the crowd. What followed became known as Bloody Harlan, a day when at least 5 miners were killed and dozens more were wounded. The violence didn't end there. Over the next few years, clashes between the miners and the company forces became increasingly violent. The Harlan County War, a bitter conflict between the miners and the coal companies, had just begun. Just like any war, this war wasn't just fought with guns and blood. It was fought with the hearts and minds of the people. And the miners weren't backing down. They were fighting for the future of their children and the generations of families who would remain in those counties for years to come. The Harlan County War wasn't a single battle. It was a series of bloody confrontations that stretched out over years. After Bloody Harlan, the miners tried to strike again and again, each time facing increasingly violent opposition from the coal companies. They weren't just fighting against low wages, they were fighting against the entire system that was designed to keep them under control. 2 of the most significant battles that occurred during the Harlan County War were the Battle of Everts and the Battle of Lynch. In the Battle of Everts, the miners fought back against the Baldwin Felts detectives, using their knowledge of the rugged landscape to their advantage. The miners, though outgunned, managed to score a victory, which emboldened them even further. The Battle of Lynch, which occurred later in the 1930s, miners faced off against armed guards and company forces, taking the fight to the very heart of the coal company's control. It was clear that the war wasn't just about pay. It's now about freedom. The miners wanted to control their lives, their work, and their futures. What's often left out of these stories is the role of the women and children. While the men were on the front lines of the struggle, the women were right beside them, supporting the strike, feeding their families, and even helping to organize. Women like Florence Reese, whose husband was a miner and union organizer, became symbols of strength. Florence, after seeing her husband threatened, wrote the famous song, "Which Side Are You On?" a question that still resonates today. Her song became an anthem of the miner struggle, a way for families to unite against the overwhelming power of the coal companies.
I'm not a coal miner, as you well know, but I'm as close as I could be not to be one. My father was a coal miner who was killed in the mines, and my husband is slowly dying with black lung. And my husband and me was in the strike in the 30s in bloody Harlan County, and I do mean it is bloody too. And they tell me, these miners say, we're going to stick it out unless Duke Power signs a contract till hell freezes over. They've got nothing to lose but their chains and their union to gain. So I say, hang in there. And now this song I composed in the 30s. And as you know, I'm old, as 40 years ago, and I can't sing very well. But you can ask the scabs and the gun thugs which side they're on, because they're workers too. Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell. Which side are you on? Which side are you on? If you go to Harlan County, there is no neutral there. You'll either be a union man or a thug for J.H. Blair. Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
As the Harlan County War raged on, the miners slowly began to win small victories, and of course, public opinion began to shift in their favor. The brutality of the coal companies was just too hard to ignore. The miners' persistence started to pay off. In 1933, the National Industrial Recovery Act was passed, allowing for the legal recognition of unions and the right to collective bargaining. It didn't immediately solve the problem in Harlan, but it gave the miners a legal tool to fight back. The labor movement began to gain traction, and the miners' cause was starting to be seen as a part of a larger national struggle for workers' rights. By 1935, after years of brutal battles, the miners were finally able to secure union recognition in some parts of Harlan County. But it wasn't until 1939, after almost a decade of relentless fighting, that the coal companies were forced to negotiate more seriously with the United Mine Workers of America. It was a hard-won victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. Today, Harlan County is a very different place. The coal mines that once defined the region are largely gone, but the echoes and the ghosts of those families and those mines are still very present. The legacy of those miners, their courage, their resilience, their unwavering fight for justice, will never be silenced. The story of Bloody Harlan and the Harlan County War serves as a reminder that the fight for workers' rights is never easy. It's a reminder that real change requires sacrifice, and often that sacrifice is paid in blood. But it's also a story of hope, because those miners, those families, they changed the course of history. They stood up against all odds and said, enough is enough. And in the end, they won. Not just for themselves, but for every single worker that came after them. This is the story of Bloody Harlan, and the brave men and women who fought for their rights, their future, and the soul of their community. Their struggle wasn't just for coal, it was for freedom, and they never stopped fighting.